Well, I mean, it's his practice in his office as minister to read the MOU before signing it. And so if it was not presented to him, he would obviously not have read it and therefore would not have signed it. But I wonder if this, in a sense, does not reflect, once again, this paralysis that happens when it comes to this issue of energy, and that has led us to where we are now, where the Presidential Council Climate Committee would be pushing this just transition, and the minister be, I suppose, pushing back on what the presidency is trying to do.
No, a big no. Minister Mantashe is part and parcel of the commission. But what I think is happening here is it's a breakdown between the department and those who are pushing this at the president. So it's an administrative bungle, which both parties must own. Insofar as the commission is concerned, the commission is merely advising. It has no executive powers. And that commission did not set up itself on its own. It was the president who said, I need an advisory committee or team. They have done their work. The onus now is on the executive to make sure that if they want to get money from outside, they must follow the policies. The Minister of Finance is part of the commission, but the cabinet has got the ultimate responsibility to handle any funds which might come from outside. Yeah. And those funds so far have been earmarked to address this migration from fuels, from fossil fuels to renewables. Yeah, yeah. So the problem here is clear. There's tension between the office of the president and the minerals and energy. You will recall that the same Minister Mantashe was asked at one stage, was ordered to give powers to the new Minister of Electricity. And there was a dragging of feet, allegedly reported in the media, that he is refusing. But he finally approved on that. But I don't think that is not the responsibility of the current Minister of Electricity either to go and look for money outside. There is a team in the presidency which is tasked specifically to do that together with some members in the commission.
Now, Hilton, we heard the president in Paris just last week saying, I think, if I'm correct, we need close to $80 billion for this just transition to be effective. We've already received, to an extent, about $8.5 billion. Now, here's a deal here for $1 billion, which seemingly was signed with the Netherlands and Denmark. Is this a significant amount of money in any way for what they're trying to do?
Good evening, Tabo, and good evening, General. Very nice to meet you, General. We haven't met before. Before going, it is a significant amount of money, but I would like to follow on the General's analysis of this fiasco, I would like to call it, of executive decision-making. So firstly, I want to agree with him that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, who is funded with 10 billion rand per annum, should examine any MOU that is signed that has substantial impact on energy supply, and they should advise the minister accordingly, who can then take an executive decision for his department. In this case, the minister claims, and I'm afraid I find it difficult to believe that I can believe he didn't read the MOU, but I cannot believe he didn't know about it. Because if he didn't, then one of two things must have happened. Either the ministerial spokesperson Mr. Magwenya is lying, fabricating, or the Sunday Times is fabricating when they quote him in quotation marks. And the presidential spokesperson says that the MOU was drafted by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. So, does the minister know what's going on in his department? And if he is put in the incredibly embarrassing situation of, on the eve of the signing of an international document at high level, at Prime Minister level in terms of the Netherlands and ambassador level for Denmark, and ministerial level on the side of South Africa, under instructions by the President, by the way, well, the invitation to sign this, but if my boss invites me to a meeting, I don't say, I'm sorry, I'm not coming, I haven't seen the agenda of the meeting or whatever. So what we have is essentially something which is echoed and mirrored, and I will talk about energy policy now. Time and again, we have the stated policies in our official documents developed in democratic processes being at odds then with policies dreamt up on the fly and stated, and I've heard these, not in newspaper reports, by Minister Mantashe, which often then contradict other statements by other departments. And what we are meant to believe is that this is a last-minute bungle, that they didn't tell each other about this. Yeah. It's simply, it doesn't fly. Yeah. Either the ministerial, either the presidential spokesperson is not telling the truth, or Gwede Mantashe is not telling the truth, or the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy isn't informing their minister what they're doing.
Is the version, though, that is advanced by the General plausible, that it could be those who've been tasked with going to get the money? They went, because there's a separate people who are appointed by the President, not necessarily by the Department of Mineral Resources, and they went and found the money, and they gave content to that MOU with the minister having not properly had sight of the details and the conditions thereof.
But the presidential spokesperson stated, quote unquote, the MOU was drafted by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. So that is either true or it's not true. You can't choose it to be something in between. And so if that minister is unaware of his department drafting an MOU, which he doesn't hear about, that is a case for the minister if he takes all of this seriously. And I believe that what is being done here is being done over and over in energy. There is a fundamental division stated by important sides of the ANC of a massive contradiction in policy. And the president, not being able to resolve this contradiction, time and again, keeps both of the contradictory factions in his party, and we have paralysis. And I can tell you chapter and verse of paralysis since 2015, a complete failure of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to get much more than a tiny bit of new energy onto the grid, despite us having official policies that require him to. And each time it doesn't happen, the last major time it happened was when there was the failure of bid window 6.
Okay.
Then the excuse was Eskom hadn't told the minister where there was space on the grid. I'm telling you, you can find out where there's space on the grid with one call to Eskom. Yeah. The same as the minister could have found out with one call to the DMRE or to the president what was in that MOU. Instead he says, I'm sorry, I haven't read it. He shows no interest in what's in the MOU. I'm sorry, they are trying to take us for fools. What is correct what the General says. Firstly, the DMRE should have read that MOU and advised the Minister. And secondly, they must all own this failure. It's not Mantashe, it's not the Ministerial spokesperson, it's not the other ministers, it's not the Netherlands Prime Minister, it's not some people in the Presidential Climate Commission, advisors or whatever. It's the executives who have to follow executive decision-making processes and collective cabinet responsibility for a mess-up. And yet, now we want to give the blame to individual people and carry on with this quarrel. I believe, and I think if you look at good governance, collective cabinet governance, that this was a failure of cabinet and a failure of the President subsequent to this failure in cabinet, to hold his cabinet to account and to be shown the finger by one of the ministers, and we don't hear anything. And so what the message that goes out is that any minister can have their own policy, which differs from official policy, and when invited to do things by the President, can tell him, sorry, I haven't read some or other document that their own department has written. No. But they're taking us for fools.
They are taking us for fools. Because what Masenza is dengue. Masenza is dengue. Because this is coming from the office of the MOU, at least, was, according to the Presidency spokesperson, generated by the office of the minister.
You know, there are two people now who are involved here. It's the minister who has taken an oath and been given a responsibility to run that department. And then you have a spokesperson who is all over, who I'm not sure whether he has taken an oath. But if I was the spokesperson, I would have even went further and named the person who was drafting the document, so that they clear the air. But in terms of tensions coming out, there is nobody who would doubt that there are tensions between the Department of Minerals and Energy, and in particular with the Office of the President. Let's say Mr. Mantashe did defy the President openly. We have witnessed the same thing from these ministers. When President Ramaphosa in February during SONA, he instructed his Minister of Finance to attend to the issue of the pensioners who are complaining that they joined the government in the 70s, 80s, but their pension was calculated only from 1996. And President Ramaphosa heard me when I was motivating for this to be investigated, and he ordered Minister Kodongwana in front of the whole country, of the nation. Guess what? We have been knocking to his office. He has completely defied the President. This is now almost 5th month. So I would agree with the notion that says these ministers are too independent. They don't have respect for their President. But as far as that, the issue of the MOU, the presidency, as well as Minerals and Energy, they still owes us an explanation. But we take the word from the minister because he's in charge of that department and he has taken an oath. I can't invest much on a spokesperson. No, I don't have time to waste.
What is interesting for me is you highlighting the fact that what conditions. I mean, for people who are not familiar with these MOUs, what are the dangers? What could be the potential conditions that the minister would be signing away?
Well, the main one is to make sure that these monies which we are getting, either from the World Bank or from the developed world, we need to make sure that this money is not going to be or increase the debt of this country. Otherwise, any government which would come in the next few years would have to shoulder this burden. Perhaps, in hindsight, we'll find that the decision which was taken was a bad one, because the document, for instance, didn't even go to the state law advisors. We need to check that process, whether it did go to the state law advisors, Department of Minerals and Energy, and whether the National Treasury was aware about this grant, if it's a grant, or whether it's a loan. So they need to clarify that. They still have time. But otherwise, we are not against the issue of addressing the need for renewables. What we know is that, for instance, by 2035, Europe would like to see that all their vehicles are using electricity. So we will be affected in one way or another, because the vehicles we are using in South Africa are from Europe and they are exported to Europe. So also those areas need to be funded, but we must make sure that the money we get, we know what are the conditions attached to that.
Yeah. As far as government processes are concerned, I mean, I saw Eskom already made a big deal about this. They made their own statement when it was signed. Without that signature of the minister, is that MOU as good as nothing, a piece of paper that can be thrown in the dustbin?
No, not at all, because the laws of this country says they are not specific as to which minister, but they say any minister can sign. But at least the case is that the Department of Minerals and Energy must have penned that document, that draft MOU. So if it didn't go that way, then maybe the other minister, the Public Enterprise Minister, Pravin Gordhan, that's another curious fellow, which it might end up that he was privy to the process more than the other one, the beard-headed guy, Mantashe.
Yes, you can come here. Much of the fear is that when sorry, Hilton, let me just add this.
Not you, sir.
not you, Hilton. What I wanted to add before you answer is that much of the fear is that when these MOUs are signed, the conditions that are attached to it, one is that hurry up and shut down the coal-powered mines here in the country, at the detriment, or to the detriment of the country, and we end up having load shedding. And this is one of the conditions that many people saying are put in these MOUs. Sorry, that's what Hilton. That's what Hilton.
Toba, I don't think we can work on the basis of many people say that this is the kind of things that's put in those MOUs and speculate what's in the MOU. What we're talking here is about executive government, and that an MOU is a serious document, firstly, and that we need MOUs, and that the MOUs must be checked by all the necessary departments, and we need the necessary cooperation to sign MOUs. You can't run a country if you don't have a process to sign, one, MOUs, and two, that you can follow up with the MOU. What we've been done, I believe, in this is we've been put on notice by the Minister of Minerals and Energy that he hasn't seen the MOU. It's been signed by somebody else. The MOU might well contain clauses or conditions that contradict energy policy, and thus when it comes to implementing the MOU, we get the normal thing, paralysis, because the political work wasn't done in the executive to reconcile and decide on one policy. You can't have two contradictory policies all the time in the same government, in different heads and do anything. The result isn't that we make a mistake either way. The result is what we see. In energy, paralysis. In freight transport, paralysis. In some areas of education, paralysis. Because of the political work isn't being done by the executive. It can't be done by advisors. It can't be done by departmental people. When there's a difference of opinion in cabinet, it needs to be sorted out in cabinet, and that is failing to be done. We can't blame any minister for being wrong. We have to blame the process whereby when we sign an MOU with a foreign country, another country, it's the whole country that signs the MOU, not the people that happen to be in the room at the time that the president managed to get into that room.
But that's exactly what are we not going to go back with egg on our face here, where the president needs to go back and say, well, we now need to change this MOU, because, as we say, we don't know who signed it. It could have been the Minister of Electricity, because the president is now sitting with leaders of Netherlands and Denmark, and the minister to sign is not showing up. This train has got to move. And the president calls whichever minister is available to come and sign.
We are all sitting with egg on our face. We're sitting with another government process which hasn't been resolved conclusively. We're sitting with an MOU that the main government department that it affects, the minister responsible for that department, has said he cannot sign off on it because he doesn't know if it's consistent with energy policy. That is a mess.
General, definitely a mess, this one. It seems. How do you resolve it?
Well, in my tweet, you did quote it. I said the president owes us an explanation, not his spokesperson. That person who is his spokesperson, you will recall even during Pala Pala, whenever he was opening his mouth, he was digging a hole for the president. I don't have confidence in these spokespersons.
I agree. The president can't hide behind his spokesperson. And I was going to quote some stuff that spokesperson had said, which also could not have been correct. So we need the president.
And as far as the hydrogen green fund itself, is it something that we have industrial capacity to carry up? Or are we in a position to get some key producers of the stuff that they want in Europe ultimately?
We are. We have some of the best technology and most able industrialists in the world related to hydrogen, what can be done with hydrogen. For example, making advanced aviation fuels. Yeah. So, Sasol, for example.
Yeah. General, I would imagine this is something that the Presidential Council on Climate Change is talking to. What advice would have been given to the president on this issue of green hydrogen?
Well, hydrogen is part of energy mix, I would submit, and it's already in operation in South Africa, especially in the construction and mining companies. Some of the big trucks are using that facility. And you must also remember that there's going to be a challenge here, and we have to be careful. We have the military aircrafts which use heavy oil, and even the trucks as well as tanks. So it is at this stage that we need to make sure that whatever shift or movement we do, moving away from fossil fuels, we have accommodated those institutions. You can't tell people on the way that no, there's no heat, there's no sun, there's no that. I cannot fire this equipment. So, but I think we are looking into that. The hydrogen, yes, is already in place in South Africa. The other thing which we may have to look at here is that the Climate Change Commission, Presidential Commission on Climate Change, I would prefer that we work directly with the Directors General. I don't have confidence in some of the cabinet ministers, especially during this infighting. But at least when it comes to the technical side of the things, drafting memorandums and developing policies, we mustn't just give that power only to the ministers. But a minister, I would be happy if a minister, relevant department, comes to these meetings with a DG and chief directors or experts in that field. I don't subscribe to this thing of politicizing every decision. We need to deal directly now with the people who understand the field. Unless those DGs are also found wanting, then we don't have a government.
Yeah. Hilton, as we wrap up, I mean, as the General suggests, how do we speed up this process? One of the ways he says is to have the DGs actually come and work directly, for example, with the Presidential Commission on Climate Change.
I couldn't agree with him more. I think that the skill set, the experience, etc., that you find in cabinet ministers as they swap from portfolio to portfolio isn't consistent with the level of technical expertise and subject matter expertise that you would find in a Director General or, as the General says, in the Director General's staff, who, you know, with the kind of budgets that we spend, I said 10 billion, it's 10 billion around a year at the DMRE, that we can hire the best people we've got, and that we can have, instead of politicized debates, we can have constructive debates where we deal with substantive issues, of which there are many. And hydrogen, we do have a number of excellent studies on hydrogen in detail. And hydrogen is one of the, it's a substance, but because of how it can be made and how it can be used, and because of the need to decarbonize, it offers South Africa a way to reindustrialize in a decarbonized way. Because of the resources we've got, we can actually be, we had gold, then we had coal, hydrogen plus renewable energy could be South Africa's competitive advantage for reindustrializing and really going into the future in a constructive way. And we can't have these petty little arguments about who read an MOU and who said this and who said that, holding us up at every stage, which is what's happening. We do have paralysis. It is a fact. We've got lots of plans, but when it comes to action, it's not happening. And this is a typical example of where we get stuck in the action phase, when we're actually getting the funds to do things, signing agreements with people, technical partners, potential trading partners, and can you imagine what they think of this process today? Why did they fly all the way here to sign an MOU, which a minister has said he may not be able to be behind because it may contradict the policy of his department?
Quite embarrassing, frankly, close to 130 business people in that room. Gentlemen, much appreciated. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Yeah, some business leaders, people traveled all the way to come and have that signed, but we couldn't even get our ducks in a row there.